Selling is a topic that divides people. You either avoid it or you love it. And without sales, we don't have a business. So we're going to look into this topic today. My name is Angela Turton. I'm senior partner with Action Coach, and this masterclass is the latest in a series of weekly webinars and workshops that we are running to help business owners throughout the crisis and beyond. So if I could just ask if you can raise your hand if you can hear me. Perfect. Thank you very much indeed. And again, if you can, I'm going to lower all hands, and if you could raise your hand again if you can see my slides. Wonderful. Thank you very much. And thank you to Rachel and Judith for putting in the chat box that you couldn't hear me. That's really useful. There is, as they have found, a chat box at the bottom of the screen, and there is also a Q&A box as well. So as we go through, if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat box or the Q&A box, which we will be monitoring. Thank you very much. So why now? Why are we talking about sales now? We've spoken to a number of business owners in the past few weeks who have felt it's wrong selling at the moment, because for now is a time for community, for support and for giving. And yes, it is, but we still have to eat. We all have businesses to support. Those businesses are supporting the workers, they're supporting the suppliers and the customers. Our workers are in turn supporting their families, etc., etc. So how are you feeling about selling at the moment? Do you feel that it's the wrong time to be selling, or do you feel that actually it's something that you're quite comfortable doing? So again, if you just type in the question, the chat box, how you're feeling about sales at the moment in the current climate, then we can hopefully tackle that as we go through the session. Businesses are starting to get back to normal. We've had a number of shops going back now. The schools are starting to open. So we're starting to get a little bit back to normal. And if we are going to be back to something that resembles a normal economy, we do have to up the ante on the whole sales conversation. We can't afford to be left behind by our competitors. We need to be marketing and we need to be selling. So just had a few comments in. Yeah, people are shifting now, I think. Yeah, open to selling. Fantastic. So we do need to start having this conversation about selling. And even if you're not ready to sell yet, to start thinking about what that will mean to you when you'll be ready to sell. So we are going to cover today, we're going to be looking at what sales is. In my honest opinion, it is only my opinion. If you agree with me, that's fantastic. If not, then I am open to debate. We're going to look at what your buyers want. We're going to be looking at problem solving, sales as problem solving, and we're going to be looking at communication. So I've been doing quite a lot of work around this recently, thinking about the mindset techniques, the morality of it all and everything. And I used to have a belief, I've always had this belief that sales is a necessary evil, that we need to support our salesmen. As an accountant, I was quite often on the opposite side of the table to the sales people. So for me, it was a necessary evil. We needed it to get the turnover up. But actually, I did see it as a sort of bad thing. However, I now firmly believe that if you have the answer to somebody's problem and you refuse to step up to the plate and tell them about that solution that you have got, then you are doing them a grave misservice. Well, I'm not talking about pushing your solution onto their problem or upping their misery so that you can make some money, but actually working out what their problem is and telling them what the solution is. It's giving people what they need, not what you want to sell. And that sort of selling is not a necessary evil, but it's a force for good. Any comments, just keep popping them on in the question and answer box. So it's solving somebody's problem. And when we look at sales in that respect, it's a really, really good thing to be doing. So let's have a look at some of our beliefs around salespeople. So if I said the word salesperson to you, what do you normally think about? If you could just pop that in the chat box, what immediately springs to mind when I say the word salesman? Yeah. So we've got pushy and a pain. Selling your granny down the river, love it. Car salesman. Okay. All of the above. We've got any positive comments coming through? Oh, that's interesting. Not trustworthy, and we are going to cover that. We are going to cover that later. Okay. I did this recently with another group, asking them what they thought of sales, and it's very interesting what comes back. But if we are business owners, then we are salespeople. As I said earlier, if we don't sell, then we are we don't have a business. It's working out how to do that. Judith, thank you very much for that positive comment. Offering relevant opportunities. That's exactly what I'm talking about here. So we need to be selling. Now, there are 4 different types of salespeople. Some of these you may recognize, some of them you may encounter, and you may even recognize yourself in these. So the first person is the order taker. And this is the person who waits for somebody to ask if they can buy something. Now, the problem with order takers is that you need to have a very well-informed customer base. In other words, you either need a very simple product or a very good marketing department that is excellent at educating the client pool. So thinking here about the Harry Potter books, maybe not the first, but by the time the second one came out, there were queues in Waterstones at 12 o'clock midnight. Thinking about iPhones, again, as soon as one comes on the market, there is a queue out the door to get the latest iPhone. Also, maybe thinking about something like McDonald's now they're reopening. My nieces shared pictures of the McDonald's near them where they drive through, and there's now a traffic jam because people are queuing up to get their McDonald's fix. But the people there are just taking orders. So they're waiting for somebody to ask if they can buy something. And there is a place for that person, but it depends what your business is. And it does, as I say, rely very heavily. If that is the sort of salesperson or the sales function that you have, you need to be putting your money into marketing, which is a completely separate subject. And this type of sales works quite well with people with product-based companies rather than service-based companies. The second person is the product pusher. This is the person that talks about nothing more than the product. And we've all seen these people. An uncomfortable evening with a double glazed-in salesman springs to mind. And these are the ones that don't let up until you buy what they have. And they don't understand that may not be something you want. and you've only been, they just don't understand. Basically, they don't take the trouble to work out what you need, and therefore they could be trying to push you something that you really don't want. I wanted to buy a new car recently, and I wanted to replace it with exactly the same as I had already. And it should have been the easiest sale in the history of cars, because I walked into the showroom and I said, I want to have this. And I had a list, I knew exactly what I wanted, and I was prepared to pay the price for it because I knew what that was. I just said, just order me one. But the guy in the showroom kept trying to sell me something completely different. It was a special offer they had in the showroom. He was going to get better commission on that one. They wanted it gone from the showroom. Whatever the reason was, he wanted to sell me this other car. Rupert and I got so fed up that we nearly walked out. And if I could have found another Jeep dealership in the area, I would have done, because I was so excited going in that I wanted to buy this car, and yet he would not stop trying to push the product that he wanted to sell at me rather than what I wanted. And this would have lost the company, the business, not just of my buying the car, but also the maintenance that would follow. And I'm sure most people have got an example of this in their lives from the people, if you're walking around, when we were allowed to walk around outside at various scenic spots, and people would be pushing rain mats or selfie sticks at you to as I say, this car situation that I was in. The third person type we have is the overseller. And the overseller will just promise the world just to get a sale. My husband used to be a solution lead. Some of you know him in computer projects. And at one stage, he was constantly at war with the salespeople who would promise the world. And he used to ban them from going out to see customers without either him or one of his team with him, because they would start promising everything just to get that sale, which he knew that couldn't be delivered by the company. So they'd be promising upgrades for free, they'd be promising features that hadn't yet been invented, then they'd be promising delivery times that could not be met at all in any way, shape or form. So that's the overseller. They just keep saying, yes, we'll give you this, we'll give you this, and we'll give you this. And now that might be great for the client in the short term, but what it means is it causes all sorts of problems in the back office, in operations, trying to deliver what those people are trying have sold. And also ultimately the customer will get fed up because they won't be getting a good service, and the company will suffer. And the company usually suffers, apart from the grumbling in the back office, which starts immediately, the company will suffer, and it's usually after the commission has been paid out. So there's a financial problem there. So if you have got an overseller, you do need to rein them in a little bit. And the fourth type of person, fourth type of sales, is the problem solver. And this is what I was talking about earlier, and it's a comment in the chat box. This is what is we would like to see happening in most of our businesses that we help. So the problem solver will take the customer, find out what they need, and they'll talk about the afters. So this is the person who knows that it is in his absolute gift to help others to find a solution to the problem that they have. They come to the role with humility and from a place of service. The sort of person that you thank with all your heart as you pay over your hard-earned cash, because you know, like, and trust them, and because you believe that your problem is on the way to being fixed. Hopefully, if anybody's got a fifth or a sixth type of salesman, please let me know. But this, I think most of our sales experiences fall into these four, and it's the fourth one that we're going to be talking about now. So afters. What is afters? Well, afters comes from Andy Bounds. Andy Bounds is the author of The Jelly Effect and several other books, and he's the #1 UK guru for sales consulting and helping people to sell more. And when we're talking about afters here, we are talking about the thing that the customer will have after they have done business with you. Because people don't buy you and they don't buy your product. They buy what they have and how they feel after they have bought from you. So for an example, people won't pay an accountant for the reports that they get and the tax return bits of paper that they get. They pay them to make sure that they, the customer, pay less tax, that the customer don't have to worry about the compliance issues because they know everything's going to happen and they're not going to get a knock on the door from the Batman or company's house or whoever. And they know that they will know after they've been working with an accountant how their business is doing. And you don't buy a newspaper for lots of bits of news, unless, of course, you want the paper for lining your guinea pig cage or something. But most people buy a newspaper for what they'll get out of that newspaper. So it's being informed about current affairs. It's having, knowing what's going to happen to you personally because you read your horoscope. And it's knowing what's going to be on television. So those are the things that you buy the newspaper for. You don't normally buy it just to have lots of paper in your house. So this is the sort of thing we're talking about. And in your business, and what we'll be covering on the workshop, is looking at what is the afters in your business. So for example, for a photographer, they're not necessarily paying for the work that you did taking that picture. They're paying to have either a great piece of art on the wall that they can look at, or they're paying for a professional image so that their website looks better. They're not paying you for you to stand in front of them and take their picture. So when we are talking to our potential customers and prospects, there's 4 different zones we could be talking in. We could be talking in our past, in our future, in the customer's past and the customer's future. So what do all these areas mean? What does that mean? And what is the customer interested in? So all too often we're in that top, sorry, let me just go back one. All too often we're in that top left-hand box. We're looking at our past. We're the little shop. We're looking at our past and what we've done. So our websites and our brochures often lead with this. Who we are. We were formed. We've been in business 10 years. There's 2 of us, or there's 8 of us, or we give our whole history. We say we're the only provider of whatever widget we're selling in. So it does look like a CV or a resume for those American cousins. And if we're starting from that, then what does our customer hear? Well, he just, quite frankly, he's just not interested. You haven't earned the right to tell him yet about your past. He doesn't know why that's relevant to him at all. So what we want to do is we need to move the conversation down into the customer, into the potential prospect, or the prospect's viewpoint. So we're going to flip that, because the customer will be saying, so what? What's that got to do with me? Now, you may well have to be talking to the customer about his past and the future. But if we just flip the resume, this is actually what we want them to hear. This is how we want them to know the benefits of dealing with somebody who's been around for a while. and we want them to know the benefits of somebody who's the only person in the UK to have this particular widget. So we're looking at benefits of why, what is in it for the customer, to have all that history behind it. And there is a place for this, but it's not at the start. So we have to talk to them about them. This is where we need to start with our conversations, our sales conversations. We're looking at what future can you give to your customer when you're talking, once you've offered him the solution that you're going to give. And I say you're going to be asking him lots of questions. So they will expect, when you're there with your prospective client, we will not expect you to know anything about them or their problem yet, because you haven't had a great deal of opportunity to speak. They will expect you to know a little bit about you, and who am I, what am I doing? They will expect you to know about your products and your services, and they will expect you have done some research on their business. Now, the amount of research you do will depend obviously on the size of the sale, because if you're only selling £100 something for £100, you may not be spending a lot of time on research. But if you're selling a £10,000 service, then obviously you need to do an awful lot more research on what their business is and what they might want. But do not assume anything, because you might be wrong. And this is your opportunity to ask lots and lots of questions. As it says there, play dumb. Don't assume, just keep asking questions. And Andy Pease wrote a great book called Questions Are the Answers. So if any of you are sort of wanting to explore more about questions and what questions you can ask, then that's a good place to start. So we just keep asking questions and we listen. And the old adage of, you've got one mouth and two ears, use them in that ratio, yeah, holds true. Just keep asking questions and keep talking to them. And sorry, not talking to them, but keep getting them to answer your questions, and so they can talk to you. So we'll ask the question, we will listen, we will give them some positive strokes, and by that I'm not advocating anything that would be immoral or illegal or highly questionable when we're allowed to have face-to-face meetings again. These are the small comments that show you are listening but do not interrupt. So it's things like, yeah, that's interesting, or tell me more, or just the and so that they know you haven't fallen asleep. And especially on Zoom, we just need to keep keep them knowing that we are listening to them. So those little positive, that's really interesting, tell me more, yeah, or how has that made you feel? All of those sort of things, just keep nodding. You're not asking a separate question here, it's just a positive comment to make them keep going and keep talking to you. But do remember that silence is golden, and in that place of silence, both you and the client, prospective client, gets to think. And sometimes, silence is uncomfortable. We don't like it, so it's very. It gets to be a bit, oh goodness, I've got to say something. If you're feeling like that, then probably your prospective client is feeling like that as well. And because they're not expecting the silence, they will jump in to try and fill the gap. Whereas you, because you're expecting to feel this uncomfortableness, will wait it out, and they will probably tell you deeper things because you are keeping quiet that they would if you were just jumping in to fill that silence. And when you're with somebody, if it gets too uncomfortable and you really can't bear it anymore, then maybe that's the time to either have a little bit of a tell me more about that, or are you thinking? And some people do very quiet when they start thinking, so you'll have to gauge that as you're sitting in front of something. But my point is that you shouldn't be afraid of the silence. So again, let them sell themselves. Now, when we're talking and getting to questioning people, what we want to try and do is we want to try and reach the emotion that they're in. So we're not going to be asking them which widget fits most in your factory, but we might be getting to the emotion of, what is that going to, how is that going to make you feel to have the correct widget working in your factory? Because ultimately having that piece that's correct will give the person a huge amount of satisfaction. So dig deep. And again, this is composite with what you are selling and how much you're selling, how much it's worth. If you're selling pads of paper, perhaps if you're selling, the A4 stuff that the students use just to write lots of notes, you may not want to ask too many questions about that. But if you're selling high-end notebooks, then you might want to ask a lot more questions about that, because you want to get the right notebook for that person, or because they are going to be distributing that, so you want to know what their customers are going to feel. And again, it's the emotion of holding something that's so lovely in your hands, that you can reach, and you can make people feel that is really something. And once you've reached the emotion, that's possibly the time to stop asking questions. But make sure you've got enough. I mean, every situation is going to be different. There is no prescription for this. You just have to keep going until you feel you've got enough. We have been lots of experiments about the fact that sales decisions are based mostly on emotion. And it's whether or not you know, like, and trust salesperson. Do I think he's got my best interests at heart? Do I really, really want the things that he's described to me, the afters that we were talking about earlier? And once they've made that decision, once you said, yes, I really, really want this, then your logic kicks in and you start saying, okay, how am I going to explain this to the board? And how am I going to explain this to the missus or the husband or the kids or the business partner, whoever it is that you need to justify this to? And that's where your CV comes in. As we spoke earlier, there's a place for those, we are the biggest in the country, we are the best person possible to be talking to you, because that's the logic. That gives you reassurance that your emotions aren't leading you astray in some way. So as I said to you at the very while we were talking about that, there is a place for that, but it's after you've asked all the questions and you've got to the emotion. The board is unlikely to be swayed or to be reassured by you turning up and saying, oh, I bought it because I like the guy, or it just felt right. I had this warm, fuzzy feeling when I was talking to him, so it felt right to buy what he was selling. They want to have their logic because they're not in that meeting with you. So you need both sides of the equation. And talking of equations, we have our trust equation. Now, this is something that we were talking about in Action Coach. It comes from one of our Action Coach senior partners, and he was talking about it on our Monday morning webinar. And I just thought it really fitted in here. So trust is where you show credibility, reliability, and likability. So the credibility is all those things on your resume that we've been talking about. This guy actually exists. He has a website. He has a business telephone number. I was able to get hold of him. I know he's a credible person. He was recommended to me by whoever it was. He's in my BNI group. Any of those sort of things prove your credibility. Then reliability. Have you done what you said you were going to do? Did you turn up on time to the meeting? Did you send anything beforehand to the meeting? Did you do what you said you were going to do before the meeting? And likability, you know, do I like this guy? Could I bear to have any sort of business relationships with this guy? You know, even if it is only I'm buying a newspaper from him, probably not. But, you know, you've got to like that person. But the problem is, well, it's not a problem, it's an opportunity, is that all of this is undermined if the client sees or perceives any self-interest in what you're doing. So if he thinks that you are selling him this product because it gains you the most commission, he will not trust you. It will be, I don't believe that this is right for me. So when I was talking about these different zones, this is your, as a salesperson's, future. This is where the self-interest comes in. So the client really doesn't want to know that. They want to know, they don't care about your past except as a logical backup. They really don't care about your future, except to make sure, again, that you're credible and that you're going to be around to sort them. They want to talk about their past because that's where the problem started, but they're really, really interested in their future, and that's the thing you need to concentrate on. So guys, what are your afters? So at the end of the day, people won't remember what you said or did, but they will remember how you make them feel. So make them feel that they had a good experience. And a lot of people earlier were putting sort of very pushy comments about salesmen. But if a salesman could give you this experience that made you feel valued and made you feel like your problems were being solved or being heard, then that is possibly something that you would remember and that you would be happy to be involved in. Okay, so we're going to talk about communication now. Have you ever had those sort of conversations where you've been talking quite happily with somebody, you feel you've got everything sorted, and then the outcome is completely different to what you said? And it happens all the time. And I'm sure everybody, you know, can you know, think of something that's happened to them. So communication is the response you get. So if you've got the wrong response, you probably haven't communicated in the right way. Does that make sense? So this comes back to checking in and to seeing whether you're right or wrong. What, you know, just what do you feel? It could be the other guy is simply not listening. But then is that your fault for not, we're not talking fault or blame here, but is that then your responsibility to ensure that he does listen to what you're saying? Or do you need to say something in a different way to make sure he listens, and so that you get the outcome that you want? Now, in our COVID-19 world, we've lost a lot of the signs we used to read people. A huge amount of how we read people and how we communicate was with our body language. We used to look at things like how they walk into a room, how they stand, how they pour their coffee, how they sit, etc., etc. And now we only see people from the chest up, sitting in front of a screen, muttering, "Can you hear me?" So we really need to pay, and often our screens and our cameras are misaligned, so they think they're looking straight at you, whereas in effect, that, you know, you think they're looking, you know, out the window or whatever, because their camera and their screen aren't on the same screen or something like that. So we really need to pay attention to our other clues that we have, and that's something that we're going to have to relearn. I mean, obviously you can't see me standing here waving my arms around and getting excited about things, which you would, be, and I can't see your responses. So I'm having to learn from, in your case, your words, but you're having to learn from me, my voice, what I'm saying, but also how my voice is, the tone I've got, the speed of delivery, the pitch, whether I'm sounding excited, or not, or whether I'm, coming across as a supportive person or not. So you have to learn those from the tone and the speed of delivery, and everything is slightly different, because when we were before in COVID, before COVID came, we were only 7% was on our words, whereas now we're communicating so much more on social media, where nobody can see anything apart from your words. So things have changed, and it's looking at that. We have to, and when we're thinking about how we're communicating, we've all heard the golden rule, which is to communicate as to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, to put it in a biblical tone. Now, we would suggest at Action Coach that there's one up from that, and that is the platinum rule, and that is to talk to others in a way that works best for them. We at Action Coach use DISC quite a lot to try and work out how to communicate with other people, and what other people, how other people would like us to talk to them. Now, you have, we go through this fairly quickly, and if you want to talk about DISC in greater detail, then give either Rupert or myself a ring. Rupert is an expert in DISC. And so what we would look at is, we would look at how quickly people make a decision. So the D's and I's would make a very quick decision. The C's and S's may need more support on that. Again, the C's and S's may need to have a lot of facts and figures to make their decision, whereas a D would be making his decision very, very quickly and will want you to move on. They don't want to know the figures, the detail. They want the executive summary. So it's what does your client want? What will they want from you? If you're speaking to an I or an S, they're very much, what is the effect of this going to have on my people? And how for an S, how is that going to support what I'm doing, my people that I'm supporting? And maybe for when you're talking to a D or a C, you're talking about how is this going to help, what tasks I've got to do and make me get them quicker. So it's just a question, just be aware that people may not want to hear the same message that you would want to hear. They may want to hear it in a slightly different way. And again, this is something that we'll be covering on our workshop on Tuesday. So this again is straight from Andy Bounds. The sales process that we would expect you to be looking at is to look at your afters. So what is it what is the solution to the problem that that your client has? So what is your afters? We will then start building certainty that you can do the job and your solution will really, really work. And then we do the close. Now, quite often, and especially in empathetic people, people for whom sales is a little bit of an icky subject, we forget the close. We do all the rest and we forget the close. But without the close, it leaves the client feeling, well, they're left hanging, really. It's a bit like they've gone through a blockbuster and then right at the end there's no resolution and they've got nowhere to go. So unless you ask for the close, you're letting that person down, because you are putting the burden on them rather than just taking it over for yourself. So it looks something like this. The majority of the time you're spent talking will be about you questioning them, digging deeper and deeper until you get to that emotion. when you've got to the emotion and you think, yes, I know exactly what this person's problem is, and I know that I have the solution that will help them best, you will then start to say something like, okay, Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, I think I understand what the problem is. Do you mind, sorry, do you mind if I make some suggestions? And they will say, yes, of course, because after all, that's what you're there for. And so at that point, you start giving them the answers because you've got the answers to their problem, and they, with any luck, will start questioning you. And you really want them to be questioning you because you really want to get to any problems out the way, or any questions that they've got about your product or thing out the way while you're sat in front of them, rather than having them do that once you've left and they're sitting on Google, Googling the question that you could have answered in 2 minutes while you were there. And it also then will create doubt in their minds. So you really do need to get to that, to get all those stones. And, you know, once as you're going through this process of giving them your answers and them questioning you, you can just keep coming back, checking, you know, how does that fit with you? Is that what you had in mind? And if there's two different things that you're suggesting, you can sort of say, well, which one fits best with what you had in mind? You know, which one works for you? And as I suggested earlier, we need to get these handling objections out as early as we possibly can. We need to be getting them on the table so we can talk about them. And this is, you know, if they say, absolutely, I agree with you, I want this, go for it now, let's sign it up, then you just move on to the next phase. But if they're still sort of thinking, oh, I'm not sure, you can start asking them, you know, those questions. What is the reason that you don't want to go ahead? If that reason was addressed, would you want to go ahead? If they say no, then there's be another reason. So you just dig a little deeper. All those skills that you were using earlier, you just keep using. Digging a little deeper, invest in time to answer their questions, so that you can get to the point where you're not leaving them with doubts in their minds. And again, we will be talking about this later in the workshop. So that's great. You've now got to sale. So how do we work this in our businesses to make sure that it happens consistently? Well, we have a system. And again, Action Coach love our systems. Everything's systemized. It works much better if it is systemized. But the great majority of the customers we work with don't have one in place, or they don't use it consistently. And those that do have a system and do use it and are consistent at it and monitor it more to the point, they are the ones that outperform everybody else, and they are brilliant at sales. So the system could be a simple checklist, it could be a script, it could be a workflow, or it could be all of those things. Working out, and obviously every single business and every single product will have a different process for you. You know, what works well for your industry and your business may not work for a business similar to yours in a different industry, or a business in the same industry that's slightly different to you. So it is all about what works for you. And again, we'll be covering that in the workshop a little bit longer. And as I said, the ones that work really well, they monitor these things. So they work out where they're losing people. They work out how many people are on, you know, how many leads they get in, how many of those get into a meeting or a telephone call, and how many of those ultimately go on to buy. But at every stage of that process, they will know where they've lost people. And what that means is that if those indicators change, they can come in and say, well, why has that changed? And it might be that the salesperson has changed the script and the script isn't working quite so well anymore. Or it might be that the marketing that you've been doing has suddenly had to change and you haven't changed it quickly enough. And And we might have seen that going into COVID, where people didn't change their marketing messages quickly enough to come across as compassionate and, in a new reality. So then if you're monitoring all these things in a very granular level, you can pinpoint the issue straight away. And this is where things like CRMs and all those sort of good things will come into play, so that you can actually monitor what you're going through. And again, that could be as simple as a whiteboard on the wall. So we're not, these things don't have to be simple, have to be complicated. They can be very simple, but they do depend on your business and your product. Just very quickly, I'm going to be talking about USP and point of difference, because this is a whole task and a whole workshop in itself. But it is important that you know what your point of difference and your USP is. It's important for marketing, but it's also important when you're in front of a prospect, that you actually, it helps your credibility and your likability, and all that trust. It helps you to get that trust up, and you can, if you know what your USP is instantly and what your point of difference is, why should they buy from you rather than from the person down the road? And it could be, in the case of my Jeep dealership, it was the only one in the area. Now, that's not a particularly great point of difference or a USP, but it did mean that I ended up buying from them. So what is your USP and point of difference? It's something for you to start thinking about and to mull over. You're not going to get the answers in the next 5 minutes. As I say, it's something completely individual. Every single business will be different, and we can cover this in the workshop next Tuesday if we have time. And lastly, I'm going to talk about guarantees within the sales process, because a guarantee may make the process easier, and it's not something I would like anybody here to rely on, because you don't want to be thinking you've got the sale and then having to give the money back later. But it may give your client, a prospective client, a confidence in you as a business. If you are guaranteeing your results, then they will have a little bit more confidence that actually you believe in what you are selling, or you are going to be monitoring what you are selling, or part of the service. So if, for example, you have a builder who's, and part of his guarantee is that he will clear up after himself, not after you, obviously, after himself, or you get 10% off, or you get, 2 days free, or whatever it is, and you can have confidence that they're actually going to be monitoring that clear up situation. So you can have confidence that everything is going to be cleared up for them. So again, this is a whole workshop in itself, a whole seminar in itself, and we will be covering it briefly on Tuesday when we go through our workshop. So that's the end of my sales discussions. Has anybody got any questions about what I've been talking about over the last half an hour or so? Oh dear, Rachel has had to buy newspapers for her guinea pig, so she didn't want the news at all. So for her, the afters was the guinea pig having a comfortable cage, and not the being informed as to her news. Indeed. So this is a question. So if I was in the newspaper business, then I would want to know that that's why she was buying it, because I wouldn't need to put any news in it. I could just give her the paper for free. Wonderful. Thank you very much for some kind comments coming in now. So let me just, there's a question in the question and answer. I've not got that open. Let me just. What is the difference between a product pusher and an overseller? So an overseller is likely to be pushing, sorry, that's the wrong word, is likely to be adding extras to whatever it is that you are selling. Whereas a product pusher will have one product in mind, and they will keep saying, this is the product that will work for you, regardless of whether it does or not. So it will be, instead of, so if I'm talking about a product pusher, so as I said, we had an evening with double glazing salesmen, and they just kept going on and on and on about, you know, this is what this is going to work. An overseller would be likely to say, oh, if you buy our windows, we'll pop in a free doors as well. So yeah, lots of things. Great. Okay, so next steps. If you did enjoy the workshop, the webinar, I would really love you to give me some feedback. The forms will be coming out to you tomorrow morning, probably, and there'll be a link in there for the feedback. Really, really would be wonderful if you could give me that, because that helps me to make these better and to give you better service next time. If you would like a 30-minute follow-up session, then that's on our website. It's on the front page of our website, which is shown there. So if you just click onto our website, you will see the 30-minute follow-up session. If you've got a particular problem that you would like some clarity over, and 30 minutes won't be long enough, then contact one of us, either Rupert or myself, and we'll book you in for a longer session. And then our workshop, which I've been mentioning throughout, which will cover your own afters, questions, you know, how to get some questions that might work for you. It will cover sales processes, including scripts and workflows, USPs and guarantees. If we get into it, it'll be highly interactive. It will be in a meeting format rather than a webinar format. That'll be on Tuesday, so if you want to book into that, that'll be on Eventbrite as well. And some really exciting news for us anyway, is that the person who has inspired most of the content on this webinar is Andy Bounds, and he has agreed to come and talk to East Midlands businesses. Actually, he works very closely with Action Coach, and he has agreed to give us a webinar on the 23rd of June, just for East Midlands businesses. So if you would like to come to that, it is being supported by the Action Coach community in the East Midlands to make sure that we are able to have a thriving economy coming out of COVID. So please contact us. The events will be on Eventbrite, but as I say, it is breaking news. It was only arranged this morning. So that is it. Lastly, if you would like to follow us on Twitter or on Facebook, the details are on the screen. I'll just quickly check the answer box. Okay, nothing else coming in. That's about time for us. So thank you very, very much for listening. Thank you very much for all your kind words as well. And for those of you who are going to be on the webinar, on the workshop on Tuesday, I will see you then. And for those of you who will be seeing us on Thursday, I will see you then. Thursday, we will be talking about money. It's my background as an accountant, so we're going to be talking about how important it is to know your numbers and working out how you can get the numbers that you want out of your business so you get the information you need to run your business properly. So that's it. Many thanks.